Thank you again for joining us at the 2024 MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is David Rhodes, and I'm a first-year MBA student here at MIT. And I'm very excited to introduce the closing panel of this year's conference, The Power of Sports, presented by Wasserman Foundation. Our panelists today are Jessica Gelman, CEO of Kager, the Craft Analytics Group, Nate Silver, statistician, author, and founder of the Silver Bulletin, and Megan Rapinoe, soccer legend, activist, and New York Times bestselling author. Our panel will be moderated by Cassidy Hubbarth from ESPN. As always, the panel will run for 45 minutes, and we welcome all your questions submitted throughout via the Cadence app. And with that, I leave you to Cassidy Hubbarth. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. David did tell me that we can go crazy because this is the last panel of the conference, so we're about to get into it. And look, it's a privilege to be here, especially with this esteemed panel. This conference is really just another example of the power of sports and how it brings people together. And that's where we're going to start. Given we all have our own journeys and relationships with sports, let's start at the beginning. And I want to start with you, Megan. When do you remember your earliest memories of sports and what drew you to them?
I think this is like a situation where is it a memory or have you just seen the pictures? Because I think I was probably too young to have an actual memory. I'm a twin. We both played sports growing up. We're the youngest of 6 kids. We had an older brother, Brian, who played soccer. And I think that was kind of the sort of catalyst. We just looked up to him and wanted to run around behind him and do everything that he did. And I think just sports in general for both my sister and I, but certainly for me, just felt natural. We played literally we played a version of one-on-one every single sport you can possibly imagine with varied rules to our liking. But it's just something that's always been a part of our family, I think, and a part of my sister and I's relationship. And it's like the skin I'm wearing is playing sports and being around sports.
And Nate, where did your love of sports begin?
I mean, not for being a great athlete, obviously. No, I grew up in a college town in East Lansing, Michigan, so you could literally hear the roar of Spartan Stadium from my backyard. My parents were big college hockey fans. We would go to college hockey games every weekend. Michigan's a great sports state. When I was 6 years old, the Tigers won the World Series, and then the Pistons and the Red Wings, not the Lions, but the Pistons and Red Wings had really good. They're getting there. They're getting there. I was heartbroken.
So close. So close.
But just kind of in the blood between that and the numbers, obviously as well.
So I grew up in the Midwest, and I was born a couple years after Title IX was passed, and so I have to give full credit to my parents for giving me the opportunities to play sports, and I was the only girl playing on all boys teams from a very early age. And it was soccer, it was ice hockey, and I loved to compete. And so that was what sports was for me, and it became this way to connect because I definitely was, do people use this phrase, a tomboy? I was a tomboy. And I don't know if that's still used. That was why I was asking that question. And I think that I just felt more at ease when I was playing sports, and it was the way that I was able to connect with people. My parents both worked full time. I was a latchkey kid, and so we would just go and play, honestly, pick up football, and that was just what I did, being really active. And then I think to continue on, I loved sports, and growing up in Chicago during the Michael Jordan era, yes. And also the Chicago Bears Super Bowl Shuffle was when I was in 4th grade, but being surrounded by the fandom and the excellence and having these athletes who I was inspired by the way, mostly male athletes, because that was what it was and that was what was available. But I loved all aspects of it. And we didn't go to a lot of sporting events when I was young, like, and usually we were like behind a pole when we went. But I thought even then,
Wrigley?
Yeah, but I thought even then it would be really fun to be on the other side of this too. Like, yes, I love playing, but like this is something that really connects people.
Well, I mean, you were an incredibly accomplished athlete at Harvard. So did that realization come while you were playing or after your playing?
That I wanted to go.
You wanted a career in sports.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to go into sports when I was graduating from college. So again, the WNBA started, I'm just sounding so damn old. The WNBA started the year
Accomplished.
Yeah, okay, thank you. The year that I graduated from college, and so I didn't even know that playing professional sports was a thing until like December of my senior year. And I was pretty burnt out on basketball at that point in time, but I was like, oh, I should probably go and try and play basketball because I knew I wanted to go into sports, and I thought if I could go and be the product, it would give me a perspective and an idea for in the future when I would be hopefully on the other side, helping to create memories because again, those are some of the best times with my family growing up.
Nate, you had your transition was, is it safe to say, a little later in life into sports? You're developing analytic models and writing about sports in your personal time, then transitioned into making it a career out of it. What was that transition like for you?
I mean, so my first job out of college was being an economic, an economic transfer pricing consultant, which is just as boring as it sounds, right? You're telling like Motorola how to price their semiconductor from like Malaysia to Singapore. Really boring. So I had a lot of free time at work. I began working on a model which became known as Pacoda. It's a baseball player projection model. I would also stay up late at night and play online poker. This is like the poker boom years, Chris Moneymaker, Easy Money. And so I wound up like, after kind of waking up, staying up all night, going kind of comatose in the job, right? Like not being able to use like the printer for like the last 3 months. Eventually quit to work for Baseball Prospectus and to play online poker.
What was your poker name?
Nate the Great. I mean, you want to be a little braggy.
Love that. Yeah, you don't got to tell me.
Just came natural to you, right? Nate the Great. How's it go? Are you still very active on Nate the Great?
Online poker is kind of hard right now. There's a fair amount of cheating and other shady stuff that goes on. I play a lot of live poker. Kind of rejuvenated that habit. And it's a little bit like Jessica. I mean, I love the competition. Poker is unique in that anyone can enter any tournament, right? So like you can it's equivalent to like going in to a 3-on-3 NBA tournament and like you're playing against Sue Bird or you're playing against Steph Curry, right? Poker is kind of like that. Now I think I am pretty skilled, right? Like I play at a pretty high level, but like liking the competition and being in the spotlight, right? Been on poker playing TV a few times, like it's a lot of fun if you like competition and pressure.
Megan, it's I joked about this that we could probably do a whole week conference on your sports journey. And maybe we can get into a lot of that here, but I think what's just so profound about your journey is just your point of view and your voice. When was it during your sports career that you knew that your voice had power in sports?
I think it was, to use your word, I think it was a little bit of a journey. I think being a twin is such an interesting part. Any twins out there in the audience know you sort of are at like an ebb and flow with each other all of the time. So for, the sort of early part of childhood, I was like pretty much how I am now, how people would probably see me now. And like around puberty, I just like got so awkward, and everything is so awkward at that time. So it got really, quiet, and then feel like in college really like found myself again, realized that I was gay, came out. I think I understood a little bit of the impact there. I came out, I think it was my freshman or sophomore year. just understanding that that was having an impact on other people, or understanding that that was having an impact on my teammates, even some of my younger teammates, making them feel more comfortable. It was right at the time Katy Perry's Cherry Chapstick song, or whatever the name. I actually, in true lesbian fashion, obviously have cherry chapstick in my pocket, as we all do. Like the fans in at one of my college games, I think I was visiting San Diego, and they were sort of like taunting me a little. I guess it was homophobic. I didn't really totally realize it at the time, because I also like took the joke and used it against them, because I was like, well, I'm the best player out on this field, so like I don't know what. Yeah, I am gay and I am using cherry chapstick. But
You bunny rabbit them.
Yeah.
6 miles.
Yeah,
8 mile,
yeah,
8 mile.
exactly.
There you go.
We were just talking, so, we were talking about that the other day. So I think like that was sort of seeping in, playing on the national team early. I think it was maybe 2 years into my national team career. Our collective bargaining agreement was up, so we were sort of in those negotiations, asking for more, being treated the way that we were, hearing the stories from all of our older teammates, and I was just like, this just doesn't really feel right or seem right. We're trying to use our voice, but we don't really have a platform for that. That was really influential, just starting to understand the business side of things and how that works. And then I think really in 2015, us like winning the World Cup in 2015, having this totally bizarre experience of, everywhere we went, all the games were sold out. The World Cup was in Canada, which was essentially a home World Cup for us, which was unbelievable. The final being in Vancouver, sold out. We win, and one of the craziest World Cup games ever. Carly has a hat trick in the first half, and an incredible half field goal. And
I'm still getting chills. I don't know about all you guys.
It was wild.
I remember it well.
We go to New York, and we have this like incredible ticker tape parade. And it's like, wow, feeling the world has really sort of like changed. And then like getting on a flight to fly back to the West Coast, like in economy. And I was like, this is not, it's something, I'm not a math person, I think, but the math is not mathing here. And so just having that feeling of like, something has to change. We're trying to go through, the CBA route, and we're trying to negotiate, and it's like, if they don't let you in the building, you can't sit there and negotiate with them. So I think it was really then filed our equal pay law our claim with the EEOC, and then also at the same time just starting to be more educated and understanding more race relations in our country. If you think 13, 14, 15, it's Trayvon Martin being murdered, it's Michael Brown being murdered, it's the protests in Ferguson, and I feel I'm coming to consciousness about that, and I'm learning more about that. And then obviously, Colin kneeling and me kneeling in solidarity with him, and that sort of, I think, blew everything open for me, and understanding not only do I personally have a voice that I want to use and that I'm willing to use, but I also have this incredibly unique platform of playing for the U.S. all the time. It's very different. So you and I talk about the differences all the time, because the WNBA did all this before Colin ever even now. Minnesota Lynx took their stand, wore the T-shirts. The WNBA players were doing this, well before. But it was in a domestic league. It was different for me. Every time I stood up, I was wearing the American flag, saying those things. And certainly with, the platform of the U.S. Women's National Team and the historic success there, I was able to, I always like to say, leverage America against itself, because the thing America loves most is winning and sports and people who are loud. And I was like, I'm here. Hi.
You made me.
You made me. I'm uniquely American.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the, the long version of the evolution of that, and just really realizing, I think for us as a team too, I know I'm one of the more, prominent or popular figures, but it really was such a collective experience for all of us, really like coming to consciousness about our own power and deciding to do something about that.
Well, you being places like here and sharing that story, and you know, kind of giving that perspective to people who may not be so in tune to, you know, all the fights that you've had is all part of it. But in terms of just how you galvanize the people around you, who you seek out to support you in these, like, that's, I think a lot of people have fights that they want to fight but don't know where to start. And it seemed like it was like a perfect tornado of things happening at the same time, but how did you figure out where to start? Was it just having the confidence and courage to speak up, or was it making sure you were talking to, you know, Sue or family around you, that this was something you wanted to take on?
I think two things are huge factors for me. One, I'm from a really big family and I'm a twin. So I don't even think of myself as just me. Whenever I think of me, it's always me and Rachel. And certainly being from a big family that I am, it even goes beyond that. So I think the idea of like teamwork and other people's perspectives and that kind of idea coming just always felt really natural to me. And then obviously playing a team sport, and particularly a women's sport, where if you're like at the very tippy top of your craft as a woman or your business or your industry, there's usually not very many other women there with you. Maybe a couple, but it's very rare. For us, on playing a team sport, that's all there was women who are elite in their craft, who have that sense of teamwork, who have that sense of confidence. So we became each other's permission structure. Really, we were like, that's crazy what that U.S. Soccer president said, right? And we're all like, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. We didn't have the sort of like just casual gaslighting that so many women experience all the time. So in our fight, we got to show up as, you know, the U.S. Women's National Team. We got to show up as 20 women all the time. We got to leverage the media. We were excellent on the field. And we got to sort of tie all of those things together. I think that's where a lot of that confidence came from. I know a lot of my confidence, even just stepping out and being one of the more vocal players on the team, that sort of being my role. We talked about this a lot. Alex and I, our most effective role was to use our influence in the media for the team. Some people's roles, like I wasn't gonna read every single brief. Like they're long, it's a lot, it's just, but Becky was. Yeah. And Kristen was. And, Kelly was gonna be, sort of the strategist behind the scene or whatever it was. And we kind of used that sort of teamwork and put it into a different kind of framework and use that for each other. So even though it was me going out and speaking, like I didn't make up all these talking points myself, I was speaking on behalf of all of it and all of us, and using that kind of idea of a collective to push forward what we all ultimately knew was true.
I mean, teamwork from one of the greatest teams in history, being stars in your own role. And Jessica, in speaking about building a community, how has your experience building the Sloan Conference enhanced the platform and also how you advocate for causes and issues in sports?
I mean, so first of all, probably about 7 years ago, someone posted a tweet that had a picture of there being no line for the women's bathroom at the conference. And that someone may have been Daryl. And I said, why would you post this? Why are you pointing this out? And it was a joke for him, but I was embarrassed by it. Mm-hmm. And so like, what are the cues that we're gonna take to adjust these things? And so I think really Sloan was an area where I thought I could have a lot of influence. And we one of the main things early on is we wanted to have women on the panels, not women talking about women in sports. And so that was number one in terms of just like the content itself. And then we started extending and making this a more welcoming environment for women. We kept the line short in the bathrooms. No, but we created the women's luncheon. We did the mentorship program to provide more opportunities and for us to go out and market and make women and really any underprivileged part of the population aware of how analytics can help really level the playing field in the business world, and that's really what I experienced. And I think seeing what we were able to do here, and truthfully, Megan's speech at the 2019 ticker tape parade was really powerful for me. She encouraged people to use their platform, and I was like, man, I am not doing everything that I can. And so, you know, the CAGR today, our management team is over 60% women in a technology and sports and analytics company that is not that normal. And I think people are seeing a female CEO and saying, okay, this might be like a great place to work and a place where I've had children. And we're trying to create, and a number of the women at CAGR have recently had children, are about to have children, and I'm really proud of that. Because by the way, when I had a kid at work, I was, I think, maybe the second or third person who was in a senior level role at Kraft Sports and Entertainment who had. And then the other component was, just more broadly, you know, Corbin, my wife, and Daryl, and one of my college basketball teammates, and Daryl's best friend from college, Jim Steger, we collectively decided that we wanted to invest into a women's sports team and bring analytics and start to affect change and have women who were hopefully going to help drive and shape. In this case, we invested in the Utah Royals. We have our first game in 2 weeks. And we're bringing an analytics first approach, both on the team side and on the business side. And so Sloan was a starting point for me to have awareness of, oh, there's things that I can do, there's platforms that I have, so thank you, Megan, to affect change. And that was actually pretty surprising, because I didn't think about it.
Well, we're all grateful that you did.
Yeah.
And Nate, you've had a direct audience of millions of readers across, you know, several platforms and organizations that you've built. How did you think about your ability to dictate what information your audience was exposed to?
I mean, the term dictate is one I worry about, right? Like, look, I still hold on to the romantic notion that, like, if you give people more information, that in a very messy way, our democratic system will sort it out and gradually, with many missteps, come closer to the truth and toward accurate kind of quote unquote like rational decision making, right? I am very worried about a trend in the media toward kind of self-censorship, right? A trend to kind of label things as misinformation, which I think is often fairly partisan, right? So, you know, I'm a believer in kind of like democracy, and and that means like sometimes people are going to make decisions that you don't necessarily agree with, right? So I've kind of gone in the opposite direction of Jessica. Like lately, I'm kind of back on my own now after 10 years in the Walt Disney family with ESPN and ABC News, and it's really, really nice to be independent. It's just kind of more my speed to have 4 or 5 things I'm doing in a day and not going to the same office all the time. You know, I think one of the lessons that successful people sometimes have to learn, that I learned kind of the hard way, is like, if you're a successful creative, then like, it doesn't necessarily translate into being a great manager, right? Especially if what you want to do is the creative work. And so every time you're spending time in a meeting or something, you're kind of like resentful that why can't I be writing or doing media or building a model or whatever. So kind of, you know, being more mature and kind of more in touch with like, how do I want to spend my time and how can I spend it most valuably?
So how did you tackle that?
I mean, look, to reveal maybe slightly too much, I mean, look, I had a sense at Disney that I was a lame duck, and it's like actually not a bad situation to get paid to finish out a contract when you can kind of be looking toward your next thing. So I began working on a book 3 years ago, which is called On the Edge. Will be published in August. I began in the back of my head kind of, plotting this newsletter called Silver Bulletin that I now have, and just trying to like extricate myself from that with a little bit of runway.
Well, it sounds like you were anything but a lame duck because you took control of your own destiny there.
Thank you.
But your new book explores risks and how successful risk takers think. So, what is the relationship between risk and making an impact?
I mean, look. So the book speaks to a type of person that is, I think, probably overrepresented in this room, which is people who are really analytical on the one hand, and really competitive on the other hand, right? Because in a lot of fields, these are the people who are achieving success, right? In Silicon Valley, in artificial intelligence, right? Finance, tech, right? The people who kind of take risks tend to be the ones that wind up like on the top of the pile and at the bottom too, right? But like it's encouraging people to take risks, right? Based on interviews with, I talked to 200 people for the book, right? And you really kind of see common DNA. Like most it's about like kind of numbers crunching types, right? But I talked to like an astronaut named Catherine Sullivan, one of the first class of female astronauts, and she's like amazing, right? That woman has like as much competition and risk-taking ability as anybody I've ever met, right? Or fantastic like women poker players. And there are lots of guys in the book too, don't get me wrong, but there are common threads between like someone taking a risk when playing poker and someone taking a risk when like climbing a mountain. And I know it sounds like that sounds implausible, but like literally they use the same language to describe what they're doing. And so it wound up being kind of like much more of a people book and not just an ideas book than I expected going in.
Well, I'm excited to read it and explore, what discoveries you made. I loved the moment where Jess, you kind of thanked Megan for her impact. And Megan, I'm sure this is an everyday occurrence for you. But when you think about like leading the charge and influencing so many people, it's also part of like passing the baton. Hopefully someone also continues to run with it. So who in sports today do you feel like is having the biggest impact on their sport and in the world outside of yourself and Sue?
Yeah, not me and Sue. Gosh, I wish you would have interviewed me. I want to know all the, and like break it down, tell me what's going on. I mean, female athletes for sure. Probably college basketball players are having the biggest impact ever. I mean, we have a player, and I'm going to give Sue credit for this. We were talking about it the other day. Like, Caitlin has dominated an entire space. That very, very rarely happens for women. That very rarely happens for women's athletes. And usually it's on a professional level. I would say usually it's in a sort of World Cup Olympic type environment. And she's just completely captivated this entire space by sort of revolutionizing even her own game.
Yeah.
And the way that people are looking at women's basketball and just at her, in Iowa. Like, she didn't go to one of the best schools, but she made them one of the best schools. I think that women's athletes are finally given and being given or have finally taken, had the opportunity to have a platform that has reach. So whether that's through social media, like someone like Angel Reese, or being on TV more, I feel like we've sort of like grabbed this moment for ourselves that certainly was not given. But I think women's athletes are really understanding the moment and taking advantage of it and taking the risk to be in this moment. But I also think we're coming from a perspective, we've never been able to just play. That's never, like, you've never been able to just do your job. You've never been able to just do your job. You got to do like the 50 other things that like convince people or, do whatever so that you can actually do your job, which we shouldn't have to. But what it's produced is now women, even at such a young age, who have all of these other skills. They're entrepreneurs and they're content creators and they're thought leaders, and they understand the world in a different way. They sort of understand the inequities against them, so they can then use them going back out into the world and sort of dodge some of these landmines that maybe we haven't been able to in the past. So I think just women's sports in general is really in a moment and at a moment that is primed for success and for growth. And now you're starting to see, you know, the business side of that sort of catch up with the potential that really is already there. And then I think just even from a sort of larger kind of social perspective, when you hello? When you have a women's athlete on, or a team, or you're talking about a league, you're not just talking about the sports, you're talking about healthcare and racial justice and maternity leave, and you're talking about CBA negotiations, or you're talking about equal pay. You're talking about everything that intersects with women in sports. And it's like the WNBA is a perfect example, but it's like if you have, you know, black women and trans women playing in the league, you'll cover everything. And so it's also a place for community and for policy and politics and entertainment and all of it to sort of coexist. And then it's an incredible entertainment property. And, you know, going back to the love of sports, people connect with sports for a myriad of different ways. But that's what's so beautiful about it, is there's really something for everyone, pretty much. Like, people connect with sports for a million different reasons, and everybody can kind of find the thing that they're into while also being entertained by what's happening on the floor.
Well, speaking of entertainment, you know, probably the most entertaining event at All-Star Weekend was Steph versus Sabrina.
Well, it definitely was.
Yes.
For the numbers.
So, I mean, but what,
Yeah.
what kind of impact do you feel like that had in general?
Oh, there's a lot in there.
Yeah, there is.
It, you know, I think the commentary around the coverage just further solidified the need for more women in all areas literally across the world, but across every area in sport. I mean, I think, you know, watching it, like, we immediately thought, why isn't Candace on that specific broadcast? So you're going to do all of this to bring a woman in, and you're going to, you know, publicize it, and it's pretty much going to be the marquee. It is the marquee event of the sort of like entertainment night, which is the night before the All-Star game. And you didn't do it. You didn't capture the moment. And sort of everybody else lived up to, I mean, Sabrina shot unbelievably, yes. And Steph shot unbelievably, and those are two of the best shooters in the whole world.
They were gracious with each other in the
gracious
moment.
with each other, and it was awesome. But it also, you know, was a good thing in a way, because it did bring light to something that's so glaring that we know. I mean, it's like, I'm sure you thought the same thing of like, dang, why wasn't Candace on that brush? She's right there. She could do that more justice. But it also, you know, sort of shone a light on another area that is just very clear we need more women. I also don't love all the time, you know, I don't love putting men and women in those types of competition because somehow we're going to lose. You know, the rules are going to change, the goalpost is going to move. If she would have shot from closer, it would have been like, oh, well, she shoots from closer. So then if she would have shot with a men's ball, if she would have shot with a women's ball, if she would have, it's almost like we can't do anything right. So shout out America Ferrera and Barbie. So I don't always love those, but I also think it was a really amazing moment. It was an amazing moment because that was the most watched part of the entire, you know, this is supposed to be all of the best, most entertaining, you know, men in sports from, you know, one of the most popular sports, and everybody just wanted to, and maybe some people are tuning in to see her fail, and she didn't, and that's a really important moment also.
Yes.
But I think overall, on the whole, I think it was really good, and I would just encourage everybody who turned in that moment, like, you know, buy the league pass for the WNBA and buy season tickets and, you know, support the W. That's what's happening every day in the WNBA.
But that, to your point, what you're saying, It's not just one thing. It's multi-layered. It's multi-dimensional, and that's what that moment is. And it brought it all into the light because they had the biggest spotlight of the night. So ultimately, it was a positive thing. But there's still some room to grow, which that you could just stamp that on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Let's kind of transition just to, the future ahead of us in technology in general. And Jess, in what ways do you anticipate advancements in technology and data analytics shaping the future landscape of sports, the industry in general, and the social impact effects?
I mean,
it's a huge question. Sorry, there was a lot of.
No, it's okay. I mean, the key thing that is, and we've been talking about, is accessibility, right? Because what I mean, in particular, streaming is enabling is for more and a variety of games to be available. So, not a big surprise here, but I am a huge Harvard women's basketball fan. And I love that I can watch the games on ESPN+. And I look at the work, we recently signed the NCAA. They're coming onto our platform during a time when they really need a lot of help. And a lot of the work that we're going to be doing from a technology perspective is helping them better understand who their fans are. And working they have 90 championships that they run, and making sure with the data that they have been collecting data, but we're going to add a lot of more information, making sure that they are better informed about where they should be hosting championships versus just where people submit to be a host, based on where the customers are, or based on where there might be a hotbed in a particular sport. And that's going to attract more people to play because it's going to be accessible. And the data part there is obviously very, very significant, but also the ability for more people to be able to watch the games and watch them in different ways. Like, we've talked a lot about AI over the past 2 days, and I said this previously, but for people in different countries to have the instant translation of what the broadcasters are saying, and being able to consume it in real time is going to more closely connect us as a society, and that is like incredibly powerful. One of the things that we've kind of lost in many ways with the separation, the uncabling, I guess we would say, is that we don't necessarily always have, or I think increasingly have, those moments that everyone is watching a sporting event. And so I'm hopeful that as we continue to evolve in terms of the viewing experience, like, that we can come back to some of those. And you have these big moments. I mean, what Caitlin Clark is doing and the interest is unlike anything that I have seen, period, like what Megan said. But also in the same respect, like what Taylor Swift, which we've talked about quite a bit, what she did. And we did a piece of analysis earlier this year that blew me away in terms of Taylor Swift. So the only event that drew people and generated the kind of revenue of one Taylor Swift concert is the Super Bowl. It outpaces college football playoffs, like everything. So only one event, the Super Bowl. And she does it 3 times in one city, and then she takes that around. So from an impact perspective, that is just massive. So I mean, we have these people who move and connect, and sports is one of the big ones. So I think I'm very bullish on technology and data continuing to connect us increasingly.
We have a bunch of audience questions, as you know, we got about 20 more minutes left, and I want to try to get to some of them. Nate, someone is asking, how have you used analytics to bring issues to light within sports and support making change?
Look, I mean, I come at this from a standpoint of a journalists. And, again, like I said before, I think generally when you kind of surface better information, you tend to surface more truth, I think, potentially. Again, I worry about a world where people are shielding data a lot of the times. I know it's a cliche, but information is power, right? There's power in transparency. There's power in having a lot of eyes on something instead of one set of eyes.
In exploring how things are changing in that regard, what have you uncovered as to how we can combat fake news, if you will?
Look, I think it's important for journalists to be truth-driven primarily, and I guess I am a traditionalist in that I think the line between a journalist and activist, and both are important in our society, but those are, I think, should be different roles. Or if they're ambiguous, that should be kind of labeled clearly that today I have a different hat on than I might have another hat, right? Look, I worry that in the early days of kind of sports analytics, people in sports analytics were the outsiders, right? Kind of critiquing expert opinion of people who were kind of old fuddy-duddies and too traditional, right? And I still think that actually is right a lot of the time, right? People should be suspicious of experts and expertise, right? America, to speak about America's uniqueness, we were like the first country founded in, what you now call like liberal values like equality and freedom of speech, right? And freedom of religion and separation of church and state and things like that. And I think we should still hold those values highly and be suspicious of anybody who purports to control some huge amount of the world's information. There is an increasing amount of, power and wealth in society. Even as someone who's kind of fairly pro-free market, right? The top 10 richest people in the world get more and more wealthy every year and become more powerful than many countries around the world, right? And something like AI, you might have 3 or 4 big companies or countries that are powerful enough to have this huge hold in this entire sector of the economy. So I want pluralism. I want democracy, and those are challenges. And it doesn't necessarily mean just kind of like having one expert panel control the world's information.
I guess in a different light, another question from the audience is, how do you feel sports can bring together a country that is bitterly divided? Or do you think sports can? I'm asking you, Nate.
Look, I think sports are great. I think, if I write like a third book, it might be about why sports are socially beneficial. Look, I think a lot of people are competitive, right? And kind of, I don't know if you want to get into too much of like the evolutionary psychology, which is always debated, but you're probably selecting on some level people who are competitive and outcompete one another for status and for mates and things like that. And that's kind of selected into the human gene line, right? And given that humans are competitive, to have healthy outlets for that, I think, is good. And I think sports is for many sports, it's like a healthful activity where you gain by, become more fit by doing athletic performance, right? But also, you're having proxies for real battles. Obviously, in the U.S. tends to be good-natured, and in England and so forth, there's more hooliganism. But to say, yeah, there are people who need a competitive outlet, right? And can we make sports a healthy competitive outlet?
So I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Peace Players that basically uses sport to bridge the divide. And where they started was between Israel and Palestine. And they would put athletes, young athletes from Israel and from Palestine on the same team so that they got to know each other and break down some of the divides. And by the way, when they're 18 years old, in both countries, they go into the military. But they now had a better understanding of one another, and that is obviously a phenomenal nonprofit, and it is beyond that location. They also do a bunch of stuff in Ireland and have presence here in the United States. But that is the power of sport, because Megan, everyone on your team had the same beliefs as you? Probably not, but it allowed a forum to have debate and open those discussions. Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. How we managed to stay in lockstep for like 7 years straight is it's just a miracle. It's really unbelievable because we had a lot of battles. We had a lot of battles behind the scenes. I mean, I think we were collectively fighting something bigger, but yeah, how do you get there? There's a million different ways to get to the same place. And I think, you know, part of what we were doing, the collective part, was our competitiveness on and off the field, and us understanding we have to have all of these perspectives. We won the lawsuit because we had those perspectives. And because we were able to, you know, have people chime in at different points and have people step back and have other people's voices be louder at certain times. And I think ultimately we got to our best strategy and our best, you know, sort of path forward by getting the best out of everyone. And that doesn't always mean getting what you want, even though it's hard for me. I just want what I want. You know? It's truly not the best.
Yeah, I mean, don't we all? Veruca Salt. Actually, we have another audience member who asked this astute question to piggyback off what you just said. For you, Megan, what does allyship mean to you, and how can we be better allies to each other?
I feel like I think it's really simple. I always use this example, but I, you know, came out, and then at a certain point I was asking people I'm not asking people to be gay, I'm just asking you to respect that I am, and I'm just asking you to believe that what I'm telling you about my own experience is true, and here's some easy things that you can do, like, you know, vote for gay marriage and all of those things. So I feel like I had that experience, you know, in my mid-20s. I think Prop 8 in California, which is where I'm from, is like 2008, 9. You know, I came out sort of, you know, just right around there, maybe just a little bit before. A Supreme Court case was 2015. So right around that time, it was like, okay, you know, I'm telling you this. You're either like with me, or you're sort of calling me a liar about my own experience. And so I had that experience, and then I had the experience of being an ally and kneeling with Colin. And to me, it always just was very simple. This entire community of people are saying essentially the same thing. And Colin had a very, you know, clear directive with an actionable item, which was kneeling at the time. And it was, to me, the question was like, do you believe Black people and the experience that they're all saying that they're having and all of the, you know, the evidence, or do you not? And it's just so, are you prepared to call everybody a liar, or are you not? Mm-hmm. And I think I understand it can be more complicated than that, but to me, I think it's about understanding, you know, your own humanity and giving people that same grace and that same understanding and that same space, and showing up for them in the ways that they're asking and in the ways that they're telling you they need. And sometimes it's been, you know, me being more out front and using, you know, my whiteness or using my platform in that certain way, or sometimes it's pulling back. And I feel like I've sort of been on both sides of the coin in that. And I think it's really about like just listening and understanding that sometimes your role is to be a soldier, so to speak, or to just listen to the instructions and keep it pushing.
I like what you said about, you know, allow yourself to understand that humanity is essentially inherently varied, and that just that basic understanding will allow you to be an ally. Jess, there's a question here. You mentioned how basically you were able to see Title IX's evolution from the start. And this question is asking, what impact do you see the NIL having on Title IX and equality between men and women's competition?
Wow, this. Well, I definitely want to get other perspective on this. You know, the way that I think about college sports, I think there's a lot of pros, and I think there's some cons, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work out. But if I think about the number of collegiate athletes who will actually be impacted by NIL, maybe it's 10%. And so what I worry about is that the funding goes only to that 10%, and then the rest of the collegiate athletes, and I'm talking about Division II and Division III, maybe the Ivy League, are not getting the support for those sports. And from my view of the world, with respect to collegiate athletics, especially here in the United States, is that it's really been, for a long time, what has trained our US Olympians. And so the Olympic sports that are being played at the collegiate level, and then of course women's sports, that is my only concern. And I think broadly, we all need to collectively think about that, and that's why having some governance that the NCAA is no doubt trying to figure out and support and continue to morph and change with college athletics is really, really important. But maybe I'm misseeing it. I think there's a tremendous amount of power. I love it for the women's athletes and the ones who are being able to monetize it, and the male athletes too. But that's the worry that I have.
Megan, what do you think of NILs?
Oh gosh, there's so much.
I
I think it's great because the athletes are getting to participate in their own revenue generation.
Yes.
Yeah, what do you do about the inequality across? Is this the death of college sports? I certainly hope not. I think we, especially as a woman, have understood how important college athletics are with Title IX, and we've talked on our panel yesterday. You're the living, walking, breathing example of this. Like, some absurd percentage of the C-suite women who are in the C-suite have played college athletics. It's like an unbelievable training ground, not just for our Olympians, but for women in business and in the rest of our lives. And so how is that all affected? I mean, I think I don't know where it's going to go. I think college football is doing a wild. I'm like, what's happening there?
Who plays for who?
Somebody just told me USC was in the ACC. And I was like, what? This doesn't, it obviously does. So I don't know where it's gonna fall out. I think it's been really amazing for the growth of, particularly women's college basketball, but I think for the growth of women's sports. And so in that, sort of subset of the conversation, it's been amazing, but where it's all gonna, I don't know, is there somewhere, you tell us what we're missing. Pull the things out.
Right. No, it's kind of
we're so early. It's like we don't really know.
With the college football stuff, right? These new super conferences, it's maybe maximizing a short-term equilibrium over a long-term one. Yeah, sure. In the short term, take the 20 most lucrative programs that are not in the South, put them in the same conference, Big Ten, right? In the long run, people want to have rivalries with other teams in their region and other schools that they know people that went to school at the other school in their state, right? And so I think it's short-sighted. People are always lacking for a long-term vision. You can always gain an advantage by having a longer time horizon, and I think we see the limits of that in college football.
This question is coming for you, Nate. You mentioned that data analysts used to be the outsiders in sports. So who are the outsiders now, and how can we bring them in?
I mean, there certainly still is inequality of opportunity in sports analytics and sports in general. Maybe there are some places where I don't think analytics have gone quote unquote too far, right? But it has become the established paradigm, and whenever there is an establishment paradigm, then there can be flaws in the conventional wisdom. So, but things have adjusted a lot, right? I mean, and people should be aware of when they go from, probably we all have experienced this, right? When you see yourself as a scrappy underdog, right? And then all of a sudden you become someone who is well-known and maybe wealthy and has prestige, right? I mean, it's a little bit of a weird dynamic, and you have to kind of, sometimes failure helps a little bit to kind of keep your perceptions in check. It's probably inevitable when you kind of let success go to your head. But yeah, I mean, look, well, I'm tremendously privileged at this point in my life, and I have to kind of keep that in mind when I'm trying to analyze the world.
And Jess, just using the Sloan Conference as a way to kind of determine who is on the outside and how analytics has grown and evolved. What have you noticed over the years, 18 now, for the Sloan Conference, how this conference has grown and how just the messaging around data analytics has changed?
I mean, what's most exciting is that some of the people in the early days who were coming to the Sloan Conference, Adam Silver was the head of NBA media, is obviously now the commissioner. And so as an example, 4 of the former student leads from the Sloan Conference were on panels this year. And so that they've risen within the industry. And so clearly there's interest and an expectation and a need, but I would say from the seat that I'm sitting in, we have so far to go. And the sports industry overall, compared to finance or insurance, the data is still needing to be created, and that's what I think is the most exciting about what is ahead for us.
So I'm being told that we're running out of time, and because the conference is coming to a close. But I want to just ask one more quick question, and maybe you could just answer it with, a team, a player, an ideology, whatever, however you want to answer this. But Megan, let's start with you. What excites you most about the future of sports? Could even be like Sunday on ABC. You're excited to watch the Celtics and the Warriors.
For you,
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just only tuning in to your segments. I'm really excited about a sort of more advanced, I'm going to butcher all the words, but hopefully you can get what I'm saying. A sort of more advanced technological environment coupled with women's sports exploding. Can we get women's sports at a very early stage and use all of the things that you would be able to say better to really quickly maximize the growth of the sport in a way that is sustainable, but also can take into account all the things that are different about women's sports than men's sports.
Nate?
I think Wemby. I mean, you may have a guy who's who's a candidate for being one of the best athletes of all time.
Making up
it's
stat
always
lines.
exciting to see that happen.
Jess?
I will not be watching the Celtics game tomorrow, sorry, because I'll be watching the Iowa-Ohio State.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You can put it on your device too on the ESPN app.
Good, you're right, 2 screens.
2 screens,
Thank
multiple
you.
screens. But this is done. This live and in-person panel. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for all your insights. And happy Sloan in the end of it.
Well, stick around. We're going to do the Alpha Awards. You guys don't need to stick around, but
Perfect.
thank you. Just give us a couple minutes. Thank you so much.